Welcome to Prolife Primetime News. Today is Friday, March 31st. I'm Leslie Palma.
And I'm Teresa Watson. Thank you for joining us. In our top story tonight, we will be joined by Tim Head, Executive Director of Faith and Freedom Coalition, to talk about a huge race coming up in Wisconsin next week and other developments on the state level.
With the nation still waiting for a ruling on the abortion drug mifepristone, we'll tell you about one aspect of this strange case that pits Democrats against each other.
Leslie will tell you how half-eaten burrito figures into last year's firebombing of a pro-life organization's headquarters.
Teresa will report on a change in thinking among Democrats hoping to reclaim the House of Representatives.
Please be sure to stay till the end when we interview author Max McGuire on his new pro-life book. In one of the nation's most important political battlegrounds, the outcome of an April 4th race will determine control of the state Supreme Court. Power in Wisconsin, the state that was the tipping point in the 2016 and 2020 presidential elections, is divided between a Democratic governor, Tony Evers, and a Republican-controlled legislature. That split has placed the state Supreme Court, where conservatives currently hold a 4-3 majority, at the center of a pitched partisan battle over several key issues.
We have with us tonight Timothy Head, the Executive Director of Faith and Freedom Coalition, to help us understand what these key issues are and why this election is so critical. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Well, thanks so much for having me and for talking about these issues. This is, these are interesting days in American politics, and all of us are probably learning more minutia about the policymaking process than some of us might have been exposed to in the past.
That's true.
Very true. Well, Tim, first of all, could you tell us a little about the two judges who are battling for a place on the Wisconsin Supreme Court?
Well, I mean, I think so. The interesting piece to bear in mind is, Wisconsin, not dissimilar from a lot of states. The governor plays a role in the selection or nomination in some of these Supreme Court appointments and elections. And so we've got a governor. We've got a narrow margin for conservative justices there that are kind of a remnant, if you will, of the previous administration. So obviously, the Democrat took over the position of governorship in this last election cycle. But now a lot of certainly the governor and the rest of the Democratic Party, as well as the teachers unions and other unions, are trying to kind of regain that kind of swing position, if you will. So I would say the main thing to bear in mind is probably the Democrat. So bear in mind, these aren't partisan positions per se, but we're familiar with their ideologies, we'll say, on the bench. That I think that we can safely say that the challenger is certainly very sympathetic, we'll say, to a lot of left-leaning positions. And so, it becomes a bit of a proxy war between the now Democrat governor and the Republican legislature and the narrowly held Republican majority there on the state Supreme Court. So I think that we're trying to kind of quickly educate voters, Wisconsin voters, in these waning kind of basically less than a week now, to make sure that enough people are kind of educated and mobilized on this election, because it really will have the ability to kind of stunt anything that the state legislature could do for the next 2 or 3 years.
Well, what are the key issues that are at the center of this battle?
Well, in a swing state like this, there clearly are always kind of labor-related issues, and so right to work questions and kind of some kind of subcategories of those are always kind of pressing. But then, certainly by all means, issues related to life and also, some matters around religious liberty and some of the kind of sexual identity kinds of questions in schools and universities, et cetera. So there's kind of a labor workforce element to this. But there also are clearly, social implications for this as the legislature is trying to respond to a lot of the overreach of this current governor and frankly across the country of and placed in a lot of classrooms and college campuses and whatnot. So I would say that there's quite a bit at stake, even though again this tends to be an issue that's kind of under the radar, I think, even for a lot of Wisconsin voters.
Well, Tim, is there anything that our viewers could do at this late date to help with the outcome on April 4th?
Well, again, we're now just days away, so I would just say the turnout is going to be pretty minimal in a kind of off election cycle like this. In April, an early April election does not draw huge turnout. So I'll say that even small margins. I mean, if you know family members in the Wisconsin area, and certainly churches. That's a great place that we're actually targeting to make sure that the word is out, because just an extra 2,000 or 3,000 people, even in a state the size of Wisconsin, could swing the outcome of this election. So this is kind of one of those all hands on deck type of situations.
Well, Tim, we'd like to shift the focus now to something Jill Biden said at a Women's History Month event at the White House. She called on men to step up and fight to protect women's rights. The First Lady, she lamented that women find, they find themselves relitigating battles that they think that we've already won.
Well,
and I think, and she called on men to, step up and protect abortion rights. Let's see. She said, we need more men to hold each other accountable when women are being hurt or being left behind.
So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack, and, she kind of went on for half an hour to that effect. But I'll say that, first of all, I would say that it's always ironic to me that, we talk about women's rights, but certainly there are a lot of women, of eventual women, girls whose rights are also being ignored here. And then secondly, I guess an analogy I might draw even just from the last few days of my own life. We have two little girls, a teenage girl and a 10-year-old, and our teenager just went through a pretty serious health crisis over the weekend. And I can tell you that as vested as her mom was in her health and safety, I was every bit as vested. And so I wanted my daughter to be able to heal every bit as much as my wife did. And I would say that that's the same in a ton of cases, that fathers are, we have a lot of fathers, first of all, that are terribly engaged and invested in the future of a newborn little one. Particularly in the case of, Dr. Biden's comments are completely kind of glossed over, but we also want men and fathers to be engaged in this process and not be derelict and be irresponsible through this process. And so instead of, leaning on men to support women's the ability to terminate pregnancies, why don't we lean on men and women both to be responsible and then to follow through and actually care for these newborns, hopefully either by actually being the caregiver or at least finding another safe caring place for them to be through adoption. So, once again, this is kind of one of those comments by the Biden White House that really it's kind of don't let any crisis go to waste. Don't let any special Hallmark Channel holiday go to waste. So they're never shy to beat the drum of their ideological war at this point. And I don't think there's a whole lot to be paid attention to. Unfortunately, they're kind of screaming in the wind a little bit at this point.
Yeah, well, it seems like that her comments could be somewhat dangerous for men to start following that advice. Do you agree?
Oh, of course. But again, I think that she has maybe just a slight smattering of more credibility than her husband. But the favorability of both of them and the credibility of both of them is minimal and shrinking, frankly, by the month at this point. So, my strong hope is that most men that listen, that even heard those comments, frankly, most didn't even hear it, but that most men that heard that would chalk it up to exactly what it is, which is just kind of more ideological banter coming out of this White House.
Well, on a positive note, there's a growing number of states are taking action to defend life. Can you fill us in on some of the activities at the state level?
Oh man, I would say if there's one story that's really not being talked about enough right now in American politics and American government, it's this story that the Dobbs decision being released last June has really animated and I would say kind of empowered state legislatures. And so, we've certainly seen a few state legislatures go the wrong direction. California and New York being examples, but thankfully we're seeing many states. I would say by the end of next year, 2024, we'll see close to 30 states take significant strides toward protecting innocent life. So I would say the new governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas, has kind of come out of she was just sworn in early January, and she and the legislature in Arkansas are already taking pretty strong positions there. Oklahoma's doing the same. Texas is in the middle of their session, and by June we'll have passed some of the strongest pro-life legislation in the country. Mississippi has done just the same, and even Wyoming. So I think that there's a lot of really great examples of both protecting innocent life and also strengthening and supporting women who choose life to make sure that their pregnancies are safe, and then that they have the support that they need to care for these little newborns.
Well, Tim, why is it so important now more than ever to remind voters of the importance of electing local representatives who will be advocates for the unborn?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that one of the phrases that we sometimes use is that the cost or the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. So it's important for us, especially those of us of faith, to be really informed and engaged citizens and voters. And as we saw with the Supreme Court moving the question of life to states, we're gradually actually seeing that same Supreme Court take different positions, moving more and more decisions away from the federal system and more to states. And so we need to make sure we as voters that are focused on protecting life, that we are electing legislators in our state capitals who are ready and eager to take on these challenges with strategic compassion, is the way we say it, to make sure that we're protecting women and protecting children, and not doing it in any irresponsible ways, but making sure that we're doing it responsibly and thoughtfully.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to fill us in on all these topics that can affect so many key issues in our country. Your expertise is very much appreciated, and we hope you'll join us again as we get closer to the 2024 election.
Indeed. It's always a treat to be with you all. Have a great day today.
You too.
Thank you,
so
Tim.
much.
Good night now.
It's been 16 days since a federal judge promised a ruling as soon as possible in a case that could lead to the abortion drug mifepristone being taken off the market if the judge decides the Federal Food and Drug Administration's approval of the drug in 2000 was improper.
But that case in Amarillo, Texas, is not the only one revolving around the FDA's approval process. On Tuesday, the Eastern District Court in Washington State heard arguments in a case that pits 21 Democrat attorneys general against the Biden administration and the Justice Department.
The attorneys general say the requirements around the drug, including a certification process for anyone prescribing it, place an undue burden on patients and abortion providers. Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson, who leads the coalition, told Politico that he understands the irony of the situation. I understand I'm filing a lawsuit against an administration that I respect and a president who I admire, but that's beside the point, Ferguson said.
The Biden administration is defending its requirement that patients sign a patient agreement form acknowledging the risks of the medication, and that healthcare providers who prescribe the drug first obtain certification and prove they can accurately date pregnancies, diagnose ectopic pregnancies, and provide or arrange for follow-up care if needed. Pharmacies must be specifically certified before they can dispense the drug, and the nation's biggest pharmacy chains are currently seeking that certification.
The lawsuit claims the FDA exceeded its authority by continuing what plaintiffs describe as unnecessary and burdensome restrictions on mifepristone, and asks the court to bar the agency from enforcing them. No word on when a decision can be expected, but observers note that if the Amarillo judge rules against the continued distribution of mifepristone and the Washington judge rules the drug is safe enough to use without the certification process, That sets up a showdown for the U.S. Supreme Court.
In a related matter, Senator Tammy Duckworth, an Illinois Democrat, is asking the Federal Trade Commission to investigate complaints that the nation's only mifepristone distributor, AmerisourceBergen, is refusing to sell the drug to pharmacies in certain states.
Duckworth wrote to FTC Chair Lena Khan to say the drug distributor might be taking advantage of the controversies surrounding the drug to maximize profits. Noting the rapidly evolving situation regarding mifepristone, a spokeswoman for AmerisourceBergen said the company would, quote, continue distributing to all sites of care, including retail pharmacies, in a way that's consistent with the law. DNA from a half-eaten burrito led to the arrest of a suspect in the firebombing of the Wisconsin Family Action Office last May. Police said Ridindu Sankar Roy Chowdhury, a 29-year-old who lives in Madison, had a one-way ticket from Boston to Guatemala City when he was arrested at Boston's Logan International Airport on Tuesday. The attack was one of hundreds reported by pregnancy help centers, churches, and pro-life organizations since the decision in the case that overturned Roe v. Wade was leaked in May 2022. Roy Chowdhury will face a minimum sentence of 5 years if convicted of the charge of attempting to cause damage by means of a fire or explosive. No one was injured in the attack. The U.S. military is far less ready than we need to be, according to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Speaking to the Senate Armed Services Committee on Tuesday, Austin said Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville's vow to block the promotion of 160 military officers is having a ripple effect throughout the armed services. Tuberville has said he won't move on any promotions until the Defense Department reverses its new policy of using taxpayer money to reimburse military personnel who have to travel to have abortions. The Kansas Supreme Court heard arguments Monday in two lawsuits concerning abortion. The first challenges a 2015 law that protects babies from the brutality of a dismemberment abortion. The second suit takes aim at a 2011 law that requires abortion businesses to meet the standards of other ambulatory surgical facilities. Both laws have been on hold because of the legal challenges. Abortion, including by dismemberment, remains legal until 22 weeks in Kansas. 40 Days for Life participants in Downers Grove, Illinois, received a text message they will never forget. "Thank you so much," the mom who had traveled from Tennessee to abort her fifth child wrote. "You helped me. I needed that. I didn't go on with it. We decided to keep the baby." 40 Days has documented 285 babies saved from abortion since its spring campaign opened on February 22nd. The Idaho Senate will consider a bill that would make it a felony to transport minor girls across state lines for abortion. The bill defines abortion trafficking as an adult recruiting, harboring, or transporting the pregnant minor within this state without the parent's consent. Obtaining abortion drugs for a minor would also be prohibited under the bill. The bill already has passed the House. The Georgia Supreme Court heard oral arguments this week on the state's heartbeat law. At issue is whether the law can be enforced since it was enacted before Roe v. Wade was overturned. A lower court judge ruled last year that the 2019 law was unequivocally unconstitutional because at the time states were not able to restrict pre-viability abortions. Now they can. The heartbeat law remains in effect while the legal challenge continues. Cincinnati Right to Life is suing the Ohio Ballot Board after the board said pro-abortion groups can start gathering signatures to get a proposed amendment on the ballot this November. All briefs and responses must be submitted to the court by April 7th. Michigan State University will reimburse students in a marketing communications course who were required to purchase a $99 subscription to the website Patriarchy Rebellion, created by their teacher, Amy Wisner. The membership fees were donated to Planned Parenthood, prompting some students to alert the school's administration. The school will refund the students' money and has reassigned the course to another faculty member. And finally, today is the 18th anniversary of the court-ordered death of Terry Schindler Schiavo. Viewers might remember that the young woman went into cardiac arrest in her home in St. Petersburg, Florida in 1990. Lack of oxygen to the brain left her in a state that doctors described as a persistent vegetative coma. In 1998, her husband, Michael Schiavo, petitioned a Florida court to remove her feeding tube. The case went through 14 appeals and involved the federal government before the feeding tube finally was removed, over the objections of Terry's family, on March 18, 2005. She died 13 days later of dehydration and starvation. Priests for Life National Director Frank Pavone was with Terry in the hours before her death, and he wrote a moving eyewitness account. You can read it at priestsforlife.org/Terry. He also delivered the homily at Terry's funeral mass.
Voters in blue states should be ready to hear a lot about abortion in 2024 congressional campaigns. Democrats are betting that the road back to the House majority rests with voters who care about abortion access, especially in blue states like New York. The party lost 7 battleground congressional seats in the Empire State, 4 of which were flipped from blue to red in 2022, in addition to a handful of others in strongly blue California, New Jersey, and Oregon. While advocates for abortion organized around specific constitutional or legislative abortion bans in swing states in 2022, many expect the priority of the issue to become more widespread next cycle. One-time Arizona gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake says she will seriously consider running for the U.S. Senate, despite not yet formally conceding her gubernatorial race to current Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs. Lake, a Trump-backed Republican, maintains that she won her race last November against Hobbs and is in court fighting to prove that voter fraud and ballot irregularities were blamed for her loss. Lake's name has been floated as a potential Republican Senate candidate since incumbent Democrat Kyrsten Sinema confirmed late last year she would run as independent. When asked by Republican media personality Charlie Kirk about her future political plans, Lake said she is currently entirely engaged with her ongoing election lawsuit. "I don't know politically what I will do next. I never had any desire to get into politics, and the people of Arizona recruited me to run for governor, and we have led an amazing movement of we the people," she said. She added, however, that a Senate bid is something I will seriously consider. Committee hearings are starting for the California legislature's pro-abortion bills. Committees are the easiest place to kill bills before they have the momentum and public exposure of a full floor vote. The State Assembly Health Committee will consider at least 3 abortion bills at its meeting on April 11th. AB 352, which would prohibit the release of data related to the commission of an abortion to other states' law enforcement. AB 576, which says it would require Medi-Cal to fully reimburse for chemical abortions. Since Medi-Cal already pays abortionists over $600 to perform a chemical abortion, we believe there must be something else going on here. AB 583, which would give grants for pregnancy and perinatal help, including abortion doulas. In the next few weeks, the committee will also consider AB 571, which would prohibit malpractice insurers from refusing to cover abortionists or charging more for plans that cover liability for damages arising from abortions. AB 710, which would create a public information campaign to smear pro-life pregnancy centers. AB 1432, which would require that every health insurance policy for a California resident cover abortion. Please visit the California State Assembly Committee on Health website for instructions on how you can submit a position letter. And that's political news in a nutshell. We have with us tonight Max McGuire, who is a pro-life activist and author of a new book, The Conservative's Guide to Winning Every Abortion Argument. He lives in Texas and is a husband and father of 2 young boys. Welcome to the show, Max.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Max, before we get to the book, tell our viewers about your organization. I think it's freeultrasounds.com.
Yeah, so freeultrasounds.com, it's a resource for pro-life pregnancy centers. A lot of these pregnancy centers are experiencing tremendous amounts of censorship from Google, Yelp, all the listing pages that they relied on for years. So Free Ultrasounds, it compiles all around the country every pro-life pregnancy center so that when women are considering abortion, leaning towards abortion, they can reach out to pro-life pregnancy centers and not be directed towards abortion clinics the way that Google and Yelp want them to.
Well, you dedicated this book to your parents, Lee and Frank, and you mentioned in the introduction that your grandfather was a leader in the early days of the pro-life movement. So I guess it's a safe assumption that you learned pro-life activism at home.
Well, yes, I never got to meet my grandfather, so he passed away before I was born, but I grew up hearing stories about him and about how my family was involved. I mean, so many people were horrified when Roe versus Wade first came down, and they felt just compelled to act. My grandparents were among those people. So I'm blessed to have a good upbringing that taught me the importance of life and the importance of defending it, and I'm really blessed today to be able to to dedicate my life to this work.
Well, Max, your book is 597 pages long with 616 footnotes. So it was a massive undertaking. It lists every Supreme Court case on abortion and most of the federal laws, even pro-life laws we haven't been able to pass yet. How did you decide what to include?
So it's the title is Winning Every Argument. So it's really hard to stop writing, right? When you think you've gotten through everything, I realized, oh wait, I forgot this. Oh, I could really talk about this. It reached the point where I had to stop, had to put my pencil down, as it were, and just be done. But even after publishing, I'm still thinking, oh man, second edition, I have to do this. But it really is a guide to help people formulate their arguments. So I envision this as a perfect book for like a grandparent to give their grandson or granddaughter who is pro-life, but maybe is still in high school and college and just trying to figure out how to really defend their arguments. And that's really the goal of the book. And the target of these arguments is really the wishy-washy pro-lifer who says that they're pro-choice, which there are so many they claim to be in the pro-life movement today. We really have to reach out to them and change their mind, convince them that you really can't be pro-life and pro-choice at the same time.
Well, Max, Leslie and I, if it's okay with you, we'd like to play abortion advocates for the next few minutes and ask you some of the hard questions about abortion that you answered in your book. So here's the first one. How can you ask a rape victim to give birth to her attacker's child?
So this is a kind of question that puts pro-lifers on their heels because it's an uncomfortable question to answer. And even now, it's still an uncomfortable question to answer because obviously my heart goes out to anyone who has been in that situation, who has been raped, has had to suffer through that. But I turn to different studies that were done and different teachings that came out of places like South Africa, like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was put in South Africa after apartheid. What those different systems show is at some point you have to break the cycle of violence. Being a victim cannot legitimize or justify victimizing other people. And it's a hard thing to do. We're all human. When we are attacked, when we are harmed, it's a very natural impulse to want to lash out and hurt someone else. You go through the prison system. I put this in my book. There is a significant number of offenders in the prison system who themselves were victimized as children. It's a unfortunately very common occurrence. So what I say to people is, it's horrible if someone is raped, but that does not justify them to attack and harm and kill an innocent third party. The baby did not rape anyone. The baby is completely innocent in this. And in my book, I liken it to someone being victimized and claiming the right to just punch the next person they see in the face. It doesn't work that way. So in addition to really not making sense logically, philosophically, ethically, legally, it really is important to break that cycle of violence. And I have no idea why. I know why, but it doesn't make sense to me why in that moment of grief, in that moment of trauma, anyone would recommend that a woman go through another traumatic event. There isn't a psychiatrist worth their salt who would say that someone suffering through a traumatic event like that should immediately go through another traumatic event. That should be the last thing that we should be driving women towards.
Well, some moms develop serious illnesses or conditions during pregnancy. Shouldn't a woman be able to have an abortion if her life is in danger?
So I cover this in my book, and people are free to disagree, but I see an ethical difference in these unfortunate cases where there is a bona fide risk to the mother's life. There is a difference between an early delivery and an abortion. Abortion involves deliberately killing the child, and more often than not, removing the child from the womb piece by piece, a dismemberment abortion at certain stages. So in an unfortunate situation where someone or a woman is pregnant and her water breaks far too early and she can't continue carrying the baby to term, it's heartbreaking, but the pro-life solution to that would be to induce labor and allow that mother to be with their child, however short that may be, to love on them, to spend time with them, rather than deliberately killing the child and delivering the child anyway.
Well, Max, you're a man. Why should you even have an opinion about abortion?
I love this one. I have opinions about lots of things. I have opinions about money laundering, and I'm not a money launderer, right? We as a society have the right to dictate how we want to live, who we want to live around, what kind of laws and regulations we want on the books. So I am very passionate. I very passionately oppose murder, and I'm not a murderer, right? So you don't need to be a woman. You don't need to be pregnant to be able to take a stand against this. And I also put in my book, I joke a little bit, but it's real. The abortion movement now says that men can get pregnant too. So it always makes me laugh because on the one hand, they say this is a woman's issue. You can't talk about it if you're a man. But at the same time, they're now also screeching out that, oh no, men can get pregnant too. So obviously the first answer is that I have the right to have any opinion I want, and we as a society can regulate this as we see fit. But the other side of it, if you just want to jab them a little bit, it's just say, oh, men can get pregnant now too.
All right. So Tim, why should a teenager be punished with a baby?
So this is similar to the rape question, because more often than not, when you're talking about these situations, obviously some of them are consensual, but many of them are not. It's a similar answer to that it's even if you do not want to have the baby, it doesn't justify you killing another person. But this one, and obviously this is your question, you're playing the devil's advocate, but I take issue with the punishment. Because the punishment we're talking about here is killing an unborn child. That's the punishment. Telling someone that they can't kill another living human person, that's not a punishment. That's just stopping them from punishing someone else. So it's a hard case, right? And that's why the abortion movement, even though these make up a percentage of cases, they use these because they're hard to answer. They make people uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, being victimized or being put in an uncomfortable position or does not justify killing another person. And it really comes down to that over and over and over again. Once you can prove the personhood of the child, the personhood of the unborn child, everything else goes out the window because then it becomes homicide. So I spent a lot of time in my book really proving personhood, really proving when life begins and what life is and dismantling those. Because if you can prove that, then it's easy to dismantle all these other arguments.
Well, we're almost out of time, but clearly there's much more in the book than what we've covered. And it seems to me like everyone needs a copy. So remind us, Max, of the title and where can people go to buy it?
Sure thing. It's The Conservative's Guide to Winning Every Abortion Argument. It is on Amazon right now. Will soon be in other bookstores, but it's on Amazon right now. The Conservative's Guide to Winning Every Abortion Argument.
All right. Well, thanks so much for making time to talk to us. And we hope your book's a bestseller and that you'll come back to update us on your work.
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, Max.
Thank you so much for joining us on Pro-Life Primetime News, produced at Priests for Life headquarters in Titusville, Florida. We hope you will tune in every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
We hope you will support this show and all of our broadcasts by making a donation to prolifegift.org. These donations help fund all of our work here at Priests for Life, which enables us to continue educating, equipping, and activating God's people to end abortion. I'm Teresa Watson, Executive Manager.
I'm Leslie Palma, Communications Director. Remember, life is the only choice.